From Bilbao, it's Slow TV Radio from The Meeting Point, broadcasting not only to Bilbao but around the world. Hello and welcome back to Around the Table. And in episode 20, we are discussing the fascinating subject of names. So our topic of the day is names then. Now that's a very interesting topic, I think.
It is, yeah.
So surnames. How long do you think people have had surnames? And why do we have surnames? That's a good place to start. Why do you think we have surnames?
Well, I guess it's a limited number of names around.
Yeah.
So you need something else, don't you?
To differentiate people.
Yeah.
Because there are too many Johns in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically it, yeah. Because I think originally it was only like aristocratic people had surnames. Because they were normally the surnames of the land that they owned or occupied. Yeah. And then normal people, I don't think the common people in Europe had surnames originally. Not until about 1,000 years ago, maybe.
Okay. I guess there were not so many people back then either.
This is true. I don't know the history of the rest of Europe, but I know in England, at least, it was really about the time of the Domesday Book, which was after the Norman Conquest.
Okay, yeah.
When they, if nobody knows what the Domesday Book is, after the Norman Conquest of 1066, they wanted to catalogue exactly what they now owned. The new king wanted to know what was in the country, so they went around and they did a survey and they wrote down the number of people and the number of cows and farms and how many tons of grain they could produce, and they counted sheep and pigs and everything, and they put it in a massive book. And then they started tax collection, so they needed to know more about the number of people. So I think before then, the people at the bottom weren't really important enough to have a surname. And it was just up to the people in a town. If there were two people called John, they just found a way of differentiating.
Yeah, they had
between
nicknames
them.
maybe.
Yeah. And kind of nicknames evolved into surnames, I suppose. But for the majority of people, they weren't important enough to have a surname.
And they were only important just to collect taxes from them.
Yeah, they really became popular when everyone got involved in tax paying, and the people up above needed to know who was paying what. So it then became imperative that everyone had to have a surname, whereas they weren't that common before poor people paid taxes anyway.
I have no idea when and how the surnames started here. Because here we keep both names, surnames. When people get married, children get the father's and the mother's surnames, whereas in England and other countries, they don't. So I wonder why that is. Yeah,
there are different systems, because in the majority of European countries, anyway, they take the father's surname. And in quite a lot of countries, when women get married, they take the husband's surname.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen here.
No.
That's not a thing they do in Spain at all, is it?
No.
And I think that Spanish tradition continued into South America. I think South American countries are kind of like Spanish.
Yeah, at least in some countries.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe people from those countries can let us know how it works in there.
There are some countries where they keep both names and they take the mother's first and then the father's.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And some countries where they just take the mother's name. Because the reason for that is you always know who your mother is.
Yeah.
But if we go back to the origins of the surnames, I guess a lot of them would have been nicknames, just to differentiate. So if even now, if you down our local pub, we used to have two guys called Ken, and they were always known as Big Ken and Little Ken. And I suppose that's how names started.
Yeah.
You got two people with the surname, so you got John from the big house, or John from the new house, or John up the hill, or John who lives next to those trees, and all those developed into the names.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at categories of surnames, they're like 4 or 5 categories. So you've got the descriptive ones, which are not actually that common. So in English you've got...
Well, because that's quite limited as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose. But in English you've got names like Small as a surname.
Okay.
Which is quite funny, because sometimes people are not small.
Yeah.
Like their ancestor 1,000 years ago might have been quite small.
Yeah.
But now you can get some very big people called Small, which is highly amusing. And you get names like Long.
Yeah.
We used to have a teacher called Long. He wasn't very long. And you get colours like black and white.
And brown.
And brown, which referred to skin or hair or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so those kind of describing the person.
Yeah.
And the location ones as well. You get a lot of names that are geographical features. Can you think of a geographical feature surname?
Well, like the name of a tree, for example. I don't know.
Oh yeah, we have trees as well, yeah. No, I was thinking like hill.
Ah, okay.
Hill is quite a common name. And woods.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, someone who lived in the woods was called Woods. Okay. You do get trees, yeah. There are some tree names, aren't there?
Yeah,
like
oak tree.
Oaks,
Oh, I don't know if you
oak and ash is a tree and a surname. So there are different types of trees. Birch. I went to school with a boy called Birch, and birch is a type of tree.
But was that his name or surname?
That was his surname, yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So those ancestors would have lived near some of those trees. And those trees are obviously very noticeable for the people in the town. So you get people whose surnames are geographical things. Rivers, banks. Banks, that would have been someone who lived near the bank of a river, not a bank where you keep your money, not that kind of bank. So woods and valleys, but not valley. You get names like Dale, which is either hill or valley, I don't know, but Dale is a Scandinavian word for hills, I think. So there are other geographical ones that come from other languages that are not that common in all of England. Coombs, for example. You get the surname Coombe, and in the West Country and in Wales, Coombe is the word for valley.
I see.
But I don't know if there's anyone called Valley.
I was going to say if you have any other names for rivers as well.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. Yo. In the West Country, there's lots of people with the surname Yo, and that's an old Celtic word for river. Yeah, so even though we don't have Celtic words surviving in English, but they do survive in place names. So Yo as a surname is quite common in Devon, and it's like I say, a Celtic word for river. And Avon is another Celtic word for river, but I don't think we have that as a surname. Oh, and then you've got words like Pen, which is a hill in Celtic, and that's quite common in various forms.
And do you have names like, for example, in Basque we've got like near the river or on the way to the river, things like that?
No, I don't think so. I think they're just the noun, really, like river, banks, woods, hills.
Okay.
I don't think we've got anyone called halfway up the hill, because I know that exists in Basque. Because in Basque, you've got all of the names that end in etxe or etxea, which are all houses.
Yeah.
And if you look at those names, they're all sort of new house, old house, white house, big house, house up the hill, house by the river, and all that kind of thing, aren't they? No, we don't have all those house names. The only house ones I know, you get the word house as a surname in English, and there is back house. I've met some back houses. Back house. White House exists. White House is in English.
Amy Whitehouse.
No, she's Winehouse. No, you're thinking Mary Whitehouse was a TV critic. There was a critic called Whitehouse who was always complaining about things on the television back in the 70s. Winehouse, Amy Winehouse.
Yeah, it was Winehouse.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an unusual name, really, because you don't get a lot of wine in English. But that could be because she was from a Jewish family, so it could be of German origin, because the word house in German is the same as our word house. They just spell it differently. And wine in German is wine. So it could have been Weinhaus originally. And maybe it took an English spelling. Because it doesn't look like I don't think we would have a name like Winehouse as an English name. So maybe it was originally a German name. That's my suspicion anyway.
Okay. So we have then geographical features. We've got descriptions. What else do we have?
So the other geographical ones are the places, the surnames that are actual towns and cities in England.
Oh, yeah.
And they're normally smaller places rather than bigger places. And also there are lots of places that didn't really exist in medieval times. So I've never heard of anyone with a name like Manchester, Liverpool or Birmingham.
Yeah.
Because they grew much later, because they were from the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. Normally people move from the small village to the bigger places.
Yeah, people don't go from cities to villages. They go from villages to cities.
Yeah.
So if you were in London and there was one John that came from Lincoln and another John that came from Eastbourne, for example, you'd have to call them John Lincoln and John Eastbourne. Eastbourne, I don't know anyone called.
Okay.
But Lincoln is a name.
Abraham
Lincoln. Yeah, he's quite famous. Lincoln is a place in England, and Lancaster, as in Burt Lancaster, the actor.
Oh yeah.
And it's a good game to play on long car journeys. Actually, I recommend it. Trying to think of famous people who have surnames that come from towns in England. And you can spend hours and hours doing it.
Yeah.
So there are lots and lots of people who came from places. In Spain, you've got a different tradition, because the people in Spain that have a surname, like in Bilbao, there are quite a lot of people called Bilbao.
Yeah.
It's a fairly common name. It's not an unusual name.
No, it's not.
And do you know why that is?
I think it's for the kids that were orphan.
Yeah. It's orphans, and sometimes you had children that were just left outside the church.
Yeah.
Foundlings, as they'd be called in London. They were called foundlings because they were found. And if they didn't know who they belonged to, they just gave them the name of the city. So that Bilbao is quite a common name around here, isn't it?
Yeah.
They were just named because they didn't have any other surname. And then the other big category, which is another game you can play on long train journeys and car journeys, people whose surnames are occupations.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are lots of those.
Yeah.
And some of them are occupations that don't exist anymore. Because obviously they're all from a certain era in history when people had these occupations. And now we have lots of modern occupations and we don't have those as surnames.
Yeah.
So looking at the old ones, one of the famous ones, of course, is Smith.
Oh, yeah, that's the one I was thinking about.
And for people that don't know, a smith is someone who works with metal.
And why is so popular then?
Well, the theory is, and I don't know if it's true, but it's a good theory, is that if you worked with metal, a smith always had a big fire because it was part of the job. They always had a big fire. So in a very cold winter, other families might lose children if they couldn't afford to heat their houses. And the Smith family always had a warm fire to sit around.
Yeah.
And so they just had a better chance of surviving. And in the end, there were more people called Smith.
Yeah, yeah.
That's one of the theories, and it sounds quite good.
Makes sense, yeah.
So a smith is a metal worker, and then blacksmith is someone who worked with iron.
Okay.
And then you get names like goldsmith, which is quite rare, really. Goldsmiths and silversmiths, I think they exist, but they're quite rare.
Higher class.
Well, they're obviously rare metals, so they would be rare people, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
But smith is very common. Other occupational names are like carpenter,
Yeah.
who now makes things out of wood. Originally they made carts. The original carpenters were Roman. It goes back to Roman times. It was a Roman chariot originally, and then it went into French as a trade, and it went from making carts and things into making things out of wood in general.
Oh, I see.
Oh, and also a lot of the surnames that are occupations are of French origin, because we had names for occupations in Old English and they changed.
Oh, I see.
So I was watching a program recently with Rob's Words on the internet. He's very interesting, Rob, who talks about the history of these things. And he was saying we don't have fleshmonger. Fleshmonger was the old word for butcher. And the word butcher...
But you've got fishmonger.
We have fishmongers still, yeah. But the original word for a butcher was a fleshmonger. And butcher came from the French word bouchier or something like that.
Yeah.
And people who had occupations wanted to sound higher class, so they adopted the French word for the occupations. So words like
Baker.
Baker, is that of French extraction?
Bakery, I think, is French.
It could be, but we have the verb to bake, don't we? Do you think? I'm not sure if it's French or not, but it's certainly a surname, Baker. Yeah, I'll come back to that one in a minute. Remind me. So yeah, tailor, for someone who makes clothes. They had other names, like a sewer or something like that. They had names before. So lots of those names, they came from French. Yeah, so tailor is another one. That's a very common name with various spellings. And baker, yeah. And do you know what a female baker is?
No.
A female baker was called a Baxter.
Oh.
And that's why we also have the surname Baxter. So if someone has the surname Baker, they are descended from a man who used to make bread or something. And if your name is Baxter, you're descended from a woman that made bread.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah, that's because they had male and female occupational names. There's brewer, who made beer. Brew is the verb to make beer.
Yeah.
So a brewer was a man, and a brewster was a woman. In fact, I think Brewster is more common as a surname than brewer, because apparently it was a woman's job. A lot of beer was made by women.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was quite an important job, because a lot of people drank beer in the past. And
So men drank the beer and women made the beer.
Everybody drank the beer.
Oh, okay.
Even small children drank beer.
But weak beer.
Yeah, it was called small beer.
Okay.
It wasn't very strong, and you could drink pints and pints every day. Everybody drank huge amounts, but nobody got drunk.
Okay.
You'd have to drink the stronger type, which was more specialist. But there was the stuff that was mass produced was quite weak, because everybody drank it all the time. And it was usually women that made it. And sometimes they got special permission to sell it, and you could drink it in the house instead of taking it away.
Yeah.
You could stay in their house and drink it, and that became a public house. And that's why we have pubs today. Pubs are really public houses. That's where they came from.
Very good.
So anyway, brewer and brewster. And then you got mason, is someone who used to work with stone.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then you get masons. There was famous masons in America, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, the organisation of masons, you know, there's like the secret organisation of businessmen.
Yeah.
The original ones were people who worked with stone. And it was like a society, like a very early trade union, I suppose.
Yeah.
But originally they worked with stone.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were the masons, the Masonic Lodge.
Yeah.
Then there are lots of other, like I say, jobs that disappeared.
Shoemaker.
Oh yeah, that's another one. That's quite common in languages, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you've got Schumacher in Germany.
Yeah.
Like the racing car drivers,
Yeah.
the brothers, Schumachers. And then in Spanish you've got,
Zapatero.
yeah, he's a shoemaker as well.
Yeah.
Descended of shoemakers.
Yeah.
So lots of those occupational ones would probably translate, wouldn't they? And the other one we forgot to talk about when we were talking about inheriting names from your father, you got that huge set of son of names.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got apparently putting son at the end of our words, because in English you've got Richardson, Robertson, Stevenson, all kinds of names like that.
Yeah.
That was a Scandinavian thing, apparently. That came in with Vikings. In Scandinavian, they use S-E-N normally, don't they?
Yeah.
When you see Andersen
Yeah.
rather than Anderson.
Johansson.
Yeah. And Anderson is a name that's quite common in England, actually. But I've never heard anyone called Ander.
Funny, because we've got lots of Ander here.
Yeah. Well, maybe the Anders from Bilbao went to England and had lots of babies and then came back again.
Left them there.
Because you don't get Anders, but you've got lots of Andersons. That's strange, that. Unless it's just a corruption of Andrewson.
Yeah.
Because Andrew is a common name. But there's no Andrewsons, so maybe Anderson is just Andrew's son.
Yeah. Maybe it's easier to say.
Yeah, yeah. And so we've got the ones with S-O-N at the end.
Yeah.
And of course that's where all the Mac comes from as well, of the Scottish tradition of MacDonald, MacDougall. They're all son of Donald and son of Dougal.
Yeah. You've got the O'Brien in Ireland, don't you?
Yeah, that's the Irish version, is the O. And maybe the Mac might originally be from Ireland as well. Because the Scots were Irish before they were Scottish.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. Yeah, you've got all the O'Neills and O'Briens, which means the same kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then there's another one, which is with the Fitz ones. You get Fitzgerald and names like that.
Yeah,
and that's from the French fils, son of.
Son of, yeah.
And that was a Norman French version.
Yeah.
You get the Fitzgeralds and things like that.
Yeah. How does it work in these Scandinavian countries where they have son and daughter of?
Yeah, in Iceland you can get dotter as well, because they got a very similar word for son and daughter. So you can get Magnus daughter, the daughter of Magnus.
Ah, okay.
And Magnusson is the son of Magnus. But they don't inherit surnames. You don't have the same surname as your parents. Each generation has a different surname.
That's
So
confusing.
it's just depends what your father's name is. So if your father was called Stephen Richardson, you wouldn't inherit the name Richardson, you'd inherit the name Stevenson. And apparently in Iceland it's quite difficult to know who's related to who. They have an app now on their phone. When you meet someone in a bar, you can check their family tree and
Just in case.
see how closely related you are before you start a relationship. So anyway, that's a very interesting discussion on surnames and where they all come from. So I think that's all we have time for this week. So thank you very much for another fascinating discussion, Ursula. And thank you to everyone who's listening out there and who managed to get to the end. Don't forget to share it with all your friends and like and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And we'll see you next week for another fascinating conversation. Have a good week. Till next week. Bye.
Bye.